sadly left the team, let's say, after we promoted.
Kicked me.
But, no, we and then he roll swapped after the Miser. So
Yeah, that's the trajectory.
but after this, your career went great, right? You made like play. But,
All start. It starts with success. Is that how she did it? I can't. How did she? What was that? Hello? What the hell?
Okay, you can do this. Come on, medic. You got this. You got this. You got this. Easy ass, easy ass.
Probably a good thing for Excel because they didn't even make playoffs with them.
Oh.
Hey, dude, I'm right here. 6 teams go to playoffs. But G2, Fnatic, Mad Lions, Rogue, you expect to make it. Surprised you knew that. You knew that.
Is this the team that makes playoffs? Where are you gonna play?
Oh! Officio? Have you lost weight?
Look who's missing playoffs now.
Welcome to Berlin, Germany for the final week of LEC Summer. 5 spots already gone in the race for playoffs, and over the next days, 4 teams will fight to salvage their season and make it to the next stage. Now for Sjokz and FLICKR, this will be the last week we see them in the LEC, and they look to give Vitality a devastating loss in our opening game. At the desk today, I am Sjokz, and I am joined by Guldborg, as well as the guest at the party that never seems to leave, Ender.
Okay. You know what? Honestly, I'm glad I can join the show from afar because Cadrill's wrath can't reach me all the way here in LA. And right now, I'm just a disembodied voice. It's very
Yeah, you're
spooky,
just a voice. It is actually very
open.
spooky. Hi, nice to see you. Exactly. You know what? I also do think if you are the person at the party that never leaves, it also means you are the life of the party, and that's how I will choose to interpret
True.
that. Okay. Wonderful.
I like that. I like that.
Okay, Mikkel, how are you? Are you excited to be here?
Yeah, I'm great. Luckily, I've never made fun of Cadrill, I think, so I'm not really in any danger yet, but...
We'll have to check the tape. It all happens when you're here a couple of weeks. You know, he's a pretty easy target. Oh my God, did I just put my name on the list? Let's continue. Going into the week, 5 teams have already secured their spot in the playoffs, but their seeding is, of course, left to be decided. Now, the seeding for the playoffs is decided by championship points, which the teams gather across spring and summer, and they're meaning that spring is important as well as summer, as even though summer is weighted a bit more heavily when it comes into the playoff point system.
Exactly, right? So finishing first in summer, especially if you're a team like Rogue that's already sitting way up there in the standings, they already got 70 points back in spring by finishing in second. They would, of course, be able to launch themselves into that first place position. Also worth noting that if you don't make playoffs, your points don't matter. You don't get to like carry over some points. So Schalke there, who had 30 points from spring, don't get to randomly take those in and join the playoffs race, even from last place.
No, absolutely. Now, this is the minimum amount of points that the teams can get. Of course, course, they can very much improve on that. And you just see how important it is because, remember, we're dealing with a lower and an upper bracket. Also, you want to lock that top 2 spot. You want to lock that top 4 spot, definitely so. And I think for certain teams, it is very important because Ender Fnatic didn't do too hot when it came to the spring season, right? So they'll want to improve on that and get a good position going into the playoffs. They have a head-to-head versus Misfit even that could throw that spanner in the works.
Exactly, that's the thing, right? Fnatic only with 20 points in spring, Misfits with a big old goose egg, absolutely none right there too. It's very important you do make it in the top 4 as well so that you guarantee yourselves that double elimination. It's really rough to be a 5th, 6th seed going into the playoffs, especially when you're a team like the Fnatic that expects to be making it towards the end, expects to be making it towards Worlds. Let's not forget, last year we had 4 seeds going into Worlds. This year, only 3, and there are a lot of good teams that are not going to be making it to the World Championship.
Yeah, that's a great point. We might not be thinking about it too much yet, but the team certainly will be, and that brings us to the big discussion. Who are the current favorites to win the LEC? Let's start at the top of the table, and let's maybe start with Rogue at the top of the table right now and got so close in spring, Guldborg.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing, right? Spring, everyone came in with the exception or with the realization that we probably have all of us now that Rogue in the regular split are looking like the best team. But to me, what is so different between Rogue now and Rogue back then is that back then with their pressure, they were very good at moving that around the map, getting some pressure on towards the top side of the map, bottom side of the map if they wanted to play for hands. This time around, they have really evolved with that playstyle to the point where they can actually do that for Inspired now. With the amount of time they have from the pressure in lanes, they use a lot of that to track the enemy jungler, which in turn helps Inspired outpath the enemy junglers to the extent that he's done this split. I think Rogue has done a phenomenal job with their rotations this time around.
And the big question, as you said already, is the fact that they have built on what they had from spring. But of course, is it good enough to beat the teams that they may be meeting in the run-up to finals or possibly the finals? What does your gut tell you?
Yeah, that is what I think is actually going to define Rogue this time around, because I think there is no doubt about that. When it comes to fundamental League of Legends, Rogue is the best team we have in the LEC to do it. What some of the other teams have is this clutch factor, this X factor, and I think that's what we need to see with Rogue in playoffs as well. Once we get to these best-of-5 series, that's why it's no longer just about the fundamentals, because if you play a team that's so experienced like G2 or Fnatic in this time around, and they come out with that clutch factor where you can only rely on the fundamentals, they're going to come up on top. So this time around, I want to see Rogue be ready for this. I want to see Rogue bring the fundamentals, but also bring their own X factor.
Yeah, that's also what we heard from Reckless and Euphoria saying, yes, Rogue will have the fundamentals down and will be suffocating you. You need to be willing to make the proactive plays. And in that regard, Ender, what do we think of Reckless and G2 in terms of their chances of winning the championship in summer?
I feel like a lot of people got really hard on G2 back in weeks 3 and 4 when they lost 4 games in a row, and that's obviously going to be rough, but they've only lost 2 games outside of those 2 weeks and against good teams as well. They have the best record in the second round robin. I feel like, for me, one of the biggest improvements from spring split to summer for G2 has been Jankos really finding his footing on these more aggressive ganking junglers in the early game. I think some of the changes to the jungle itself helped him, the champions that he's able to play too, and play around mid lane in a way to unlock Caps. Reminds me a lot of the G2 of old, where Caps can get out of his lane with an early game advantage, transition that into leads, diving side lane towers. It's all these types of things that made G2 strong in the early game that we're seeing a bit of a resurgence of.
And the pedigree of their organ, of their team, is also something we take into account. Of course, historical precedent, but we haven't even mentioned Mad and Fnatic, Guldborg. Why do you think they are not as prominent on our minds when it comes to that race for playoffs in the championship?
I mean, they're always prominent as well, but it's also the fact Fnatic just came from an 0-2 week, right? We do still see some inconsistencies, even despite some of the victories coming out. But no doubt about it, these teams are also teams you need to be worried about once we reach that playoff stage.
Indeed. So we'll see what happens at the top of the table. And while that fight is still very, very exciting, the pack is coming down the stretch in the race for playoffs. And only the winner will advance to the next round. Ender, take it away.
In first, we have Danish Dynamite, who only has some small fences left to jump towards the finish line. It's dead even between Danish Dynamite and the XL Shetland Pony, but the UK representative is known for always falling short at the last hurdle. Chasing them, we have the Vitality Warhorse, famous for pulling too far ahead when the pace increases. And of course, the Miracle Horse SK Spirit. Needless to say, we're in for a photo finish.
That we are. You set that up so well. Thank you, Ender, and I hope you keep that voice for the entirety of this segment.
Okay.
So, to talk about about the race for playoffs, we are making a bit light of it because it is a 4-horse race, but it is so important for any one of these organizations and these teams. Guldborg, this is the strength of schedule that we have. So basically the teams that these teams are going to play respectively. I look at Astralis, they are playing their direct competitors, SK, XL, and Vitality. Does that give them an edge?
Yes, that horse right there, Danish Dynamite, that's my favorite horse in this race coming into this one. I think people are heavily underestimating Astralis. If you take a look at the track record against this team, they have the head-to-head against all of them, really. And I think people, they are really underestimating what Astralis do so well. As a cohesive unit, when you make a call, this is one of the most decisive teams we had. Sometimes their macro will falter. They'll always follow it no matter what. And when they are in their negative, sometimes that is what makes them so good. The fact that they're willing to, as a 5-man unit, punish at the same mistake they see countless times. We see this horse come back from a deficit, and I'm sure they're going to be able to do it against teams they've already beaten.
No, absolutely, and it's so important, especially for this weekend, because Astralis has been able to consistently, every single time, beat the teams that are below them in the standings. Not as big as a success rate against the teams above them, but it really doesn't matter right now if you see who they're going to play this weekend. It's seemingly untiltable, especially Magifelix. We know that from how he grinds the ladder as well. So I think that Astralis has a big chance, but we also have the Shetland Pony. They have never made it, Ender. What do you think to Excel?
Yeah, you know, I don't really know much about like horse racing or naming horses, but I feel like there's another name that might work a little bit better for Excel, BoJack Horseman, because I don't know, it always feels like you have some kind of hope for this team. They start out kind of bad, they get a little bit better, and then the bubble just bursts right at the end, right? You know, they always let you down, nothing actually changed, and they're not going to make playoffs again. They're not looking good. They're a game behind these other two teams ahead of them, and also we have a tough strength of schedule ahead of us. We have, you know, facing down a team like Astralis where it does look like a much easier road for Excel. I just feel like it is too hard for them coming into this final week where they have to play both Rogue and G2. That's not an easy task at all.
BoJack Horseman. Maybe the playoffs are their Secretariat movie. Maybe.
No, it's we're talking like season 4, season 5. It is
no.
For Excel. Week 8. Okay, at the risk of muddying my metaphors and going for another TV show, week 8 for Excel is often like Game of Thrones season 8. You know, it just continues to get worse and worse until the end.
No.
I hate to see it.
You did send me right into another BoJack Horseman rewatch, so thank you for that. That'll be very precious hours of my life I will be losing. But also, let's talk about the other two teams we haven't mentioned, SK and Vitality. I think SK, we jokingly said Miracle Run a couple of weeks ago, but it is within reach for the squad.
It's the thing with SK, every time we get a stigma about this team, oh, the substitutions that come through didn't work for them, oh, they're bringing in Lilith now, will they have time to synergize? Yes, every time we raise these questions marks for SK, they're doing it. Last week again, are they going to be able to beat Fnatic? Oh, they cannot come back from gold leads. We haven't seen them come back if they're behind in the early game. They do it against Fnatic, and I think countless times, a lot of it comes from Lilith as well. What he has been able to bring for the team, while not always prominent in his early laning stats, comes from the roaming. It comes from the fact that he is a difference maker out on the map. We've seen his Leona already, the way he hex flashes over vision into a mat life. This is what Lilith brings to the team. He is more decisive, and it helps them a lot.
Definitely so, and we see his development, right, from SK Prime to now in the LEC. He's learning, and it is showing. He is absorbing everything that he can here in the LEC. We will, of course, talk a bit more about Vitality as well in our pre-match analysis later, but it is very surprising to see them in this position where they are fighting for the playoffs. However, in addition to the fast track, there is another hurdle awaiting the horses this week, and now we will drop the metaphor. Patch 11.15, it will be our playoffs patch as well. Akshan is disabled for this week and playoffs. This has been decided after communication with the LEC teams. If you want, you know, the drama, just go open Twitter, but that's not for us to say. But what are we looking at here? What changes are we expecting on the Rift this weekend?
I am looking on two specifically. When I first read out the patch, to me it was casual with the extra damage you get on your E now, but also after having taken a look at a lot of the European regional leagues this week, they love Syndra. This Syndra buffs that came through on the queue with the mana there not only opened up for more mid lane Syndra, but it also opened up for a lot of bot lane Syndra. We have seen countless Syndras in the bot lane, and you know what? I wouldn't be surprised to see one today as well.
Yeah, you know, honestly, seeing those mana nerfs sort of like revert a lot of the nerfs that originally took Syndra out of favor for a lot of pro players is definitely going to bring her back. And I think on top of that too, comboing some mage buffs with some melee flex pick solo lane nightmare nerfs in the Gwen, the Viego, the Aurelia as well are all going to be really impactful because those champions were so incredibly high on priority. Okay, Cassiopeia.
Okay, Cassio. Work it.
I'm getting a little distracted there. Back to the analysis though. No, I lost it. Yeah.
Tell me about Nidalee.
Flex picks nerfed. Oh, Nidalee? Honestly, so Nidalee's an interesting one because the buffs to her weren't huge, but I feel like these buffs are going to make her like even more of a threat when you look at like other leagues. Like LPL loves their Nidalee, LCK likes some Nidalee too. LEC, I feel like of all the major regions, just never really has picked up Nidalee. I think we have maybe like 1 or 2 games this entire split, so I don't think it's going to be a lot in the LEC, but comes World Times potentially, maybe we see that become more of a weakness in our junglers and not showing that.
Yeah, and also just to clear it out, these new champions finally coming in is enabling a lot of other champions now, so champions that want to play with the range. We've even seen Seraph be paired up against the Syndra now just because, okay, she can't reach me with the range, so this is actually doing a lot to the meta, at least from what we have seen in the early stages of patch 11.15. So it's going to be curious to see what the pro players are going to be making of it, because as we said, it's going to be the playoffs pass as well.
Yes, could be a unique opportunity for the teams that need those wins in this final week to maybe show something different. Now, Mad Lions and Fnatic, they are in an intense battle to get the best of the standings. Oh, I messed that up. You know what? This is a matchup that we're likely going to see in playoffs, and tomorrow they face off in our match of the week. Just read the prompter, Sjokz.
Smooth.
At the beginning of the split, the champions of the LEC, who had done us so proud on the international stage, began to stumble.
The reason why we were struggling, I think it was the MSI journey, which made us really tired.
Basically, being burnout is the feeling that you cannot like fully focus anymore and you don't feel motivated because you don't have any break, you couldn't like refocus.
The hardest part about being an LEC representative is feeling like you could have done more. I can imagine when you're on the way back and you just lost a 2-3 best of 5, you're beating yourself up for that one and you have to find the motivation to grind out Viego, Gwen. You're quarantining when you're going to MSI and quarantining when you're coming back, right? So that's an extra layer of mental toll. I can only imagine that it was very rough on them.
Everyone in our team is quarantined, so we cannot see each other. We can't leave the house. We are gonna be playing way better at the end of the split.
Now that we are back in office, it's getting better and we started improving a lot once again.
Both Mad and Fnatic have looked similar in their playstyle so far, and with Mad's return to form, it will be a joy to watch these two impulsive and bloodthirsty teams go head-to-head.
The Dragon is secured by Mad Lions, they get the soul, they get themselves another kill.
And not only that, they should be able to pick up this team fight afterwards, go for the Baron as well.
But there's the wave! And I'm sorry, Vitality, but there's no way you live through that. Self-made dive back in, but that's a triple kill for Humanoid.
I think Mad are a really good team and they have a very similar style to us. I want to beat them because, you know, the band of brothers. Having that tag is something that I respect a lot and it's something that I want my team to have as well. And even though we have fun, we play a very solid League of Legends.
Viego's going to be powerful in this one. If he keeps getting resets, he's going to start to take off. Whipple's going to get burned down, but Whipple's going to turn right back in. He'll take on the way in. Whipple will not die. My God, it's an absolute slaughter. Hylissang straight onto Caps. Caps is gone, somehow surviving for the moment, but Hylissang almost down as well. The Requiem coming out, it's cancelled. Whipple on the front line, Reckless, you got to open up, you got to do the main things right now. He's looking for Niski. There's a couple of kills, 3 against 3 once again. Reckless flashing forward, Reckless dies!
Of course I think.
As the reigning champions, you are always looking over your shoulder, watching for who could threaten your title. And Fnatic have their eye on the prize.
Feels good to have the trophy when there are people that were hyped, like Hansama, Upset. They were both like super hyped, but in the end, I got it, guys.
Look at Tristan. Oh, Kazi dives in with the cannon. That was actually genius.
Definitely feels bad to see other people reach the things you want to, but it's also part of growing as a human to not compare yourself and really focus on the things you can do.
Upset going in. It's a mad play, but it just might work. Upset going in with the triple.
Fnatic came into summer wanting to prove that this lineup is championship material. They want to show Mad Lions who's boss.
Oh, what a fantastic match of the week. Also in the back of our minds that this may be a best of 5 we end up seeing once the playoffs come around. It is so important in the race for the top 4. Fnatic, they're coming off an 0-2 week, Guldborg. Does that make them more or less dangerous versus Mad Lions?
I mean, I think they certainly got exposed for a lot of their flaws in the games they had, and I think it was very different ways they were losing. The game against Rogue, it just felt like they never really had a chance, and then in the game against SK, it just felt like they dropped the ball in the late game from a game where they're purely in control. So I think it's good for them to have these kind of weeks before playoffs as well, get exposed before the best or the most important games rather actually come into the schedule.
But again, Ender, of course, it's going to be very important for Fnatic, as we talked about just earlier in the championship points, and the fact that you want to get yourself the best position possible going into those playoffs.
Oh, absolutely. Especially, you know, when you think about like the race for Worlds even, where we have 4, even 5 teams with Misfits in the conversation all the way at the top of the standings. Me personally, I don't see a world where Rogue and G2 don't go to Worlds. So for me, it really is a competition between Fnatic and Mad Lions. All these teams at the top are so close, but I feel like those 2 teams for me are going to be making it. So this matchup tomorrow is going to show so much for us come playoff time.
Very exciting, and there are so many key matchups this week as we decide the teams in the upper and the lower bracket for the playoffs. And when we look at the schedule for today, we see immediately how important the matchups are at the beginning for that playoff lock and that playoff race. Vitality, Sjokz, and SK versus Astralis, as well as Excel, Rogue. Then we get into the territory, Guldborg, of the top 4 fighting. It's really nice when you arrive at a super week in week 8 where there is still so much left to play for.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly going to be an eventful weekend, and the funny thing about the last playoff spot is that it won't be decided today. No one of those last 4 teams can lock today. It's also going to be about tomorrow, and also the head-to-head we're talking about with Astralis. All these teams both pushing for that last playoff spot, but also to lock those series points is what this Super Week is going to be all about.
Yes, I want some drama. Give it to us, teams, and maybe we'll see it out of Vitality. They are under a lot of pressure going into this week. And earlier, Laure caught up with Crownshot.
Sjokz, thank you, and Crownshot, thank you so much for joining me ahead of your game. How do you feel about this Super Week?
Well, practice has been going well, so I mean, I think all the teams we can take games of each team, and I think the playoff race is very close, so I'm excited to see how it will go, but I'm sure we can still make it.
It is a really packed middle of the pack, actually, and you plus Excel, Astralis, I mean, 4 teams are in a difficult situation, and when you think about it, you have to win 2 games. You can't afford to lose against Astralis. Yep. And I know that usually when I ask about this kind of situation, you guys tell me, we have to play our game, we have to be focused, but how do you put yourself in this mental mindset so that you don't think about the opponents?
I mean, I think it's just to try to be as comfortable as possible. I think me and Selfmade were already in this position multiple times in LEC, so I think we won't be that nervous. And I think it's just playing our game that we know how to play from scrims and playing aggressive and being on the same page, and I think we can for sure make it.
You told me that scrims have been going good for you. What was different compared to the previous game we saw from you guys on stage?
Well, I think scrims have been going good for us pretty much the whole season, but maybe on stage where the game is more controlled and we need to play a bit slower, sometimes we get a bit impatient and don't play patient enough. So if we can do this well this week, I'm sure we'll do well.
Yeah, I hope you can show on stage. And more about you. Within this new Vitality project, when I look at the stats and the damage, you're the main damage dealer for the team, which is interesting because talking to Selfmade and Leader, we established the fact that Vitality can carry from all across the board and every member of the map. So tell me about this new role in this summer project for Vitality.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this split is more focused around the team fights for me, right? Like early game is not played that much for me, but I think I've played in many different teams and in many different styles where I was playing around a lot, not played around. So it's a new experience. So it's always fun to try. Yeah.
And I hope these previous experiences can carry through this week. You will get to play against Schalke in the first game. They don't have anything to lose actually. So how will you tackle this game?
we just need to pretty much focus on our own game and do what we know we're good at, and I'm sure it will do well.
All right, and the aggression from Vitality. Well, Crownshot, thank you so much for the interview. Good luck on this Super Week.
Thank you very much.
And back to you, Sjokz.
Thank you so much, Laure. Wonderful interview. And indeed, they can carry from each position, but will they actually do it has been the question for me for the entirety of summer. Ender, what is your take on the Vitality project now in summer after almost 8 weeks of play?
Well, you know, it's not nearly as bad as a lot of people thought it was going to turn out. It's also not as fantastic as a lot of people thought it could go. It was pretty middling. You know, this team is right on the cusp of making playoffs. And as far as my expectations, I feel like that's slightly below where I would have thought they'd be. I thought they would be very solidly our 6th place team, you know, a clear cut above of the rest. But I think that some of the players that were maybe more hyped coming into the split haven't performed to the level we've seen from them in the past. In particular, Selfmade, I think his 2021 has been all right, but it was not nearly as flashy as his breakout performances back in 2019 and in 2020 especially. And at the same time, Leader in the mid lane is not the ERL player you know and love that's, you know, off in side lanes gallivanting, getting 1v2, 1v3, you know, outplays on a lot of these carry champions. It's been very inconsistent for him, and he's really struggled early on.
But that's the whole thing about Leader as well. So for a guy that actually has followed Leader a lot in the European regional leagues, his laning stats was always bad, also at the European Masters. But the thing at the ERLs was he was never getting solo killed. He was never pushed to the point where he was actually a negative for his team. What the goal plan was with Leader was to get him out of laning phase, out in a side lane where he could just mechanically outplay the opponents or in a team fight on an even footing. That was Leader. But now where the level has risen, where he's playing against other LEC teams, where other people are targeting him, it just seems like Vitality is struggling to find this pressure in the mid lane that they so desperately need to play for a guy like Selfmade, for example.
Well, of course, he's given the blueprint of how to beat him because of his play in the ERL to a lot of the teams. And I think when you get to a level of the LEC, Ender, they can play around that blueprint and think, okay, well, if you're used to falling behind, we'll make you fall behind even more. And then that will render your team, I wouldn't say useless, but it will be very hard for you to come back. We have seen that Sjogz, for instance, has had quietly the best early game in Vitality the last couple of weeks. We know that Crownshot deals the damage when it gets to the mid game. So what would be the game plan for Vitality this weekend?
Well, I think one of the biggest stats you can look at down the bottom of your screen, the forward percentage. First in the league at 36.5%. He is always pushing in his waves, and it does play towards the style that Vitality have gone for a lot in the early game, because I think a lot of their early playmaking is driven by Selfmade and Leader roaming up towards the top side, working off of crashing those big waves into the tower and punishing enemy top lane picks. You know, if they're not doing that, if Sjogz is just sort of pushing up there by himself, he's getting ganked, he's dying, all these things are going to look very bad for them. So it has to be coordinated around his lane dominance, around pushing in and trying to punish on those big wave crashes.
Yeah, and you know, I also cast LPL on this side, and the biggest contrast between LPL and LEC right now is that LEC tends to play more for the bottom part of the map. Fnatic comes into mind, but Vitality has the kind of stylistic to be one of those LPL teams that plays for the top side of the map. But to me, once again, that goes back to the mid lane discussion we had with Leader. If you don't have mid lane priority, you can't move around with your jungler. You can't move up to the top side of the map, and you can't have that influence that's so desperately needed. So while Sjogz is having good solo performances, we also needed for the rest of the team to come together to play for him.
Yes, a tall order for them this weekend, but it is certainly possible. But this week is also the last time we'll see Sjokz on the LEC stage. That is, you know, that's a pretty sad thing. We can't beat around the bush in that regard. But on the other hand, we have to look at them and look to play spoiler this weekend, but also for every single player on stage, hopefully to make a good impression and to get their names out there for the future.
Yeah, that's the thing, because while this may not be the last game for Sjokz, this will be last time Sjokz is playing Vitality. This is the last time these players can leave the same remark here. So what we want to see, as you just said yourself, is that we want to see them play spoiler. We want to see them do their own self-justice and their organization while they're still here, because they have the opportunity to do so now.
And one of the things that I think is just so poetic coming into this final week is their very last game in the LEC on Sunday is versus Fnatic. And if you've been following the LEC for a while now, you know that Schalke's first and only final was 2018 summer in Madrid up against Fnatic, where they played and unfortunately lost. But to sort of course correct history, yeah, it's not changing everything, but I think to go out on a win versus Fnatic would be the perfect way to wrap up Schalke's history here in the LEC.
And why not go 3-0, right? In in your last week on stage?
One last miracle run.
We'll see. Oh, that's so cute. Well, we have arrived at the final chapter of the regular season, and everything will be decided over the next 3 days. Let's kick things off.